Welcome back to Dan91's Garage. This week we're going to get everything in the engine bay buttoned up so that way we can start, drive and tune the Starlet. Let's get this done, boys and girls. See you in a sec. I think it's time to put the injectors in. To get at the injectors we're going to have to start removing a few bits and pieces, so I need to obviously take the brace off the front, and mine has an earth wire attached to it. So I need to take those off, disconnect the injector harness, lift that up and forwards out of the way. That way we can get to the rail. There's two big bolts on the top of the rail. Undo that, then the whole rail lifts up. Some people I've seen change one at a time. They take one injector out, put one injector in, but there isn't a huge amount of room in there. Plus every time you pull an injector out, obviously fuel's going to drip out of the rail down the back of the engine. So the way I prefer to do it, obviously there's no pressure in this rail because the engine hasn't been run for ages. And you're supposed to loosen the fuel tank cap as well, just in case there's any pressure in the tank trying to push stuff through. So then you lift the rail out with all four injectors still attached, because that'll obviously use the injectors to plug the holes in the rail. Then swing the whole rail over to the side, drain the fuel out, swap the injectors over here where there's a lot more room, then you pop them all back in together. So yeah, dark green in colour, 195cc standard injector, and the fuel pressure regulator is set to 2.8 bar base pressure for the 4EFE. And with the engine running and the vacuum pipe connected, it should be somewhere around 2.4 bar at idle. So yeah, that's that. The injectors I've got, obviously they're Glanza ones, so 295cc's. So yeah, I've had mine cleaned, sent them off to Hurley Race Engineering, had them cleaned and flow tested. So when they got them, they obviously test them to see what they flow like, and these actually weren't too bad, but you never know. You buy second-hand injectors off the internet, they could well be stuck, or the baskets might be so clagged up that they don't flow anywhere near as well as the other ones. So either way, they've been tested, cleaned and retested again, and now they are well within almost, you know, spot on spec for the 295cc, so they're all good. So yeah, we'll whip the rail out and switch these bad boys over, I guess. There we go, all swapped out. Glanza ones are in. I've taken the lower rubber sort of isolators or seals or whatever you want to call them off of these injectors. It's easier to put these in the head and then put the injector into these. So I'll install these in the head. Now the rail's back in and tightened down. These bolts tighten up to 19 Newton meters, the two that hold the rail in. Obviously be careful because you've got steel bolts going into an aluminium head. So that's all in there, but obviously I want to test it to make sure there's no leaks. So thankfully Toyota have thought of everything. And if we go over to our old friend, the diagnostic port, and have a look at the legend, it says FP at the top and plus B at the bottom. FP stands for fuel pump, plus B is your switched 12 volt positive. So if you just put a jumper wire in here, as soon as you turn the ignition on, the fuel pump starts to run. We go turn it on, I guess. So ignition second position, which is called on. So you can hear the fuel's coming through, the rails now filled up. And we just have a quick look around. No fuel leaking out of anybody. Nice and dry. Nice and dry again. Same for that one. And all sorted for him as well. So yeah, full set, all four, no problem. So that's all good, we can get that buttoned up now. So now it's time to fit the Glanza vacuum tube. This is off the back of the 4EFTE inlet manifolds and feeds things like the idle air control valve and stuff. But obviously the Corolla manifold I'm using doesn't have very many vacuum ports, so I'm going to add this on. And I've made myself a little T-bracket thing on the back, and that bolts to that. So now we drop him in the front here. Bolt that onto that, and we can connect it up with a short piece of hose here, so this whole tube will be seeing whatever the manifold is producing, whether it's vacuum or boost. And then we have this pipe that can go off feeding our gauge, and also has the T for the Det 3 line. Sorted. Small short length of tube feeding it, then we go round to this piece that then comes up to the back here, For the T-pieces, I'm going to cable tie that on probably to the brake booster pipe or something, just to keep it all out of the way, stop it flapping around loose. Then we got the second port going off to this length of 6mm vac hose. It's going to go across to the dump valve. So the next thing is the intercooler cold side pipe. Fitted the dump valve in, so obviously it's a Bailey single piston dump valve. Originally it was a recirculating design, and obviously the port is supposed to go off to the turbo intake pipe over there somewhere. But I'm not going to run a massive pipe right across all the scary, hot, burny, melty stuff. So basically I just banged a K&M breather on it. It's the biggest breather they do, 25mm neck, and about 2.5 to 3 inch filter, I think it is. If you have just a normal sort of atmospheric single piston, obviously with the holes all around the side and stuff, it just, or with a trumpet or whatever it is, it just literally breathes sort of unfiltered air into the engine. I didn't really want that whenever the engine's in vacuum, so that's now had its own filter. Plus, hopefully when it dumps, it might make it a little bit quieter. I didn't like the way the pipe could flap around basically as you were driving, so I wanted to arrest it a little bit more. So I've basically added a little bracket. It's bolted onto the boss on top of the gearbox. The gearbox boss is M10 by 1.25 thread, and I'm using a 20mm long bolt in there. That comes forward to a rubber grommet, which you could hopefully see down there, which then bolts onto one of the rubber hose pipe clamps that came with the intercooler kit. So yeah, just wrapped a bit of silicone hose around that, wrapped the clamp around it, and then used the M6 bolt through the grommet on the brace. So now when the engine rocks forwards and backwards, it takes the pipe with it and sort of twists, rather than it being able to sort of do anything it wants to and sort of flop around and batter into stuff as you're driving. It's not completely solid, obviously. There is a little bit of movement from side to side sort of thing, but yeah, I'm going to take it off and paint it now, but that's another one of the little things I've done. And that's what it looks like off the car. So it's just a simple piece of 25mm wide by 2mm thick, and I needed to transition from obviously horizontal to vertical to clamp up on the pipe, so I just simply clamped it up in the vise, twisted it with a adjustable spanner, then drilled a large enough hole in the end of it so I could fit a rubber grommet. And obviously the two large washers go either side, so when you're tightening up the clamp around the tube, it doesn't completely squash the rubber before it's put any tension onto the bolt clamping the actual pipe itself. So that's why there's a metal bush in there to stop this collapsing completely when you're tightening it up. So now I've got the passenger side under tray back on. Was a bit cleverer with my cut this time, actually bothered measuring it properly and sent it through with a hole saw and chopped it up, so that's a lot neater hole, and got it right first time without the hole saw tearing the shit out of it, so that was nice. Should help protect the rest of the engine and the air filter and stuff from crap splashing up, and there's still enough movement in the pipe and everything. And when it wiggles up and down, it doesn't really catch or rub on anything, so that's cool. Now we can take off the intercooler protector. So there we go. No bashes or dents or bent fins or anything, so that's cool. Been looking forward to seeing it with that off. It kind of makes it seem a bit more real now. So yeah, time for the bumper to go back on. And it's as easy as that. That's back on. I think it looks pretty cool. So yeah, there's clearance all round, clearance everywhere, and both of the pipes have got clearance. I did have to make a little spacer piece here. I've got a little 3mm piece of aluminium that I've tucked in behind the bumper here because it was a bit tight on this pipe. And now that's just lifted this off of the front mount here by 3mm, and the bottom sort of tab that screws onto the cross member, I just cut a slot in that and then sort of pulled it forward a bit with my finger before I tightened it up. And yeah, now there's enough room that the pipes can move before they touch. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, she's almost back together. Number plates left to go on last, and then she'll be ready to go out for a bath, I think. And last up is the spark plug change. So the standard plugs in this are NGK BKR5 EYA, and 5 is obviously the heat rating. So we need to step down to a colder plug, and that actually means the number gets bigger. So we're going to use some BKR 6 EYAs. So here's two I prepared earlier. The 6 heat range on the left and the 5 heat range on the right. And you can hopefully see on this section of ceramic here, this is a larger area than on the 5. So what happens is, obviously the combusted gases are going on here in the chamber, in the gas pocket, which sort of surrounds this tapered section of the insulator, and that transfers heat into the ceramic in the end of the plug. And what happens is, because there's a larger amount of area here, it transfers more of that heat into the threaded section that's bolted into the head, and therefore transfers more of the heat from the plug to the head itself, keeping the spark plug cooler. So obviously 7 graded ones will have a longer section here than 8, then 9, and you almost get up to like sort of here in some sections where there's a tiny gas pocket that can't transfer much of the heat to it in the first place, and what does get transferred to it has a very large surface area to transfer onto the threaded section of the plug, and therefore keep itself cool by transferring that into the head. So we'll get the 5s out, bang the 6s in. So yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll hook up the computer to it. I've made essentially a configuration file with some rough numbers just sort of thrown into the tables. So the good thing is you can do that on the laptop itself when it's not connected to the Det3, save it as a project. So I have my Turbo project ready to load into the Det3, so it's got all the basic settings. So we should be able to turn it on and first start it. So yeah, go get the laptop, I guess. And that'll all be coming up on next week's episode. Thanks ever so much for watching, boys and girls. I truly appreciate your support. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.